I like my beautiful garden. I like the trees. I love the bush here. And this here especially, it comes out in the summer in lovely red roses.
In this peaceful cul-de-sac on the outskirts of Birmingham, Marion Cleal lives with her son Jason.
Oh, nice them dogs, weren't they?
And they were the little puppies.
Yeah.
I love my home and I love the area, and Jason likes the house and the area, and we are both very, very happy where we live.
Marion and Jason's pride and joy is their garden.
We just like everything about it, and especially the ivy, which covers up the brick wall when you're washing up in the kitchen, which is something that I really, really like. And I just really, really, really love my garden.
For 15 years, everything was rosy, and they had no reason to believe anything would change when retired couple Elaine and Tony Reid moved in next door in 2014.
Come on, then. I know, darling.
The street itself was really peaceful.
And it looked nice and quiet, and that's what we wanted. As you think, things will be okay.
When we first viewed the house, it was in quite a bit of a mess. I had some ideas for the garden, yeah. I wanted to make it comfortable for us to sit out in, really.
This is the offending article, the shed.
Tony's first job was to mend a damaged shed that sits near the border with their neighbour's back garden.
That's where the roof had collapsed in. There was bricks missing, the roof was missing. I could see what had happened where the ivy had grown over onto the roof, what made the roof collapse. And I thought, well, we can get that sorted out, you know, we can get that roof sorted and get the ivy took off it and everything.
And he says, do you think I should have a word with the neighbour in case there's a bit of mess? I said, well, it would be polite to do that. And that's when he went round and knocked the door.
I went to my door and Mr. Reid said, would you mind if I put a new roof on my shed?
There might be some mess going on to her side, but whatever mess there's going to be, I will clear it up. Simple as that.
I said, I can't stop you putting a new roof on your shed, it's entirely up to you. But whatever you do, do not disturb my ivy in my garden.
She was just telling me, don't come in my garden, I don't want to hear about it, I don't want to know about nothing like this. Just leave things as they are, leave things alone. That's what she kept saying.
And he just looked at me as though he'd come over strange. There was something about him that I couldn't put my finger on, but he just looked very unusual to me, strange.
She had a bit of a freak out, and there was no reasoning with that. You could not reason with that, and that was a reaction we had. Just, well, it wasn't a reaction, it was just ridiculous. You know, Mrs. Clare referred to it as her ivy.
But looking at the ivy started in this garden. So it was our ivy to start with.
Despite Marion's objection, Tony was determined to fix his shed, so got straight to work removing the ivy.
And that's where the roof had collapsed in. And I got a ladder and climbed onto there and started cutting it. So hoping it was going to fall through all the way through, but it didn't. Unfortunately, it fell up with the weight of it and the weight of the roof and all that. It fell over onto their side. And that's when all the problems started.
I thought, oh no, please, not after all. This is, you know, what she'd said.
Jason was making me a cup of tea and he shouted, Mum, 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 look out the bedroom window. I went to the window, I looked out the curtains and the ivy was cut down.
And she came out of the house and she was screaming.
It was all over here, absolutely disgusting and disgraceful, and you couldn't move. You couldn't move at all. It all caved in, and it was really, really bad. Really, really hurt me and my son inside to see my garden in such a mess.
And I explained to her, if she lets me into the garden, I can get in the garden, drag it, and we can get it over. I can get it over onto my side, into my garden, and then she would have no more problems. But she totally just refused to let me into the garden.
Even though the ivy was rooted in the Reeds' garden, Marion was angry that it had fallen down, exposing her brick wall. So she immediately got on the phone to the council.
The councillor told me I had two options. I could either go to the Reeds, bake them a cake and mediate with them, which I know is not going to happen. The other option was for me to put in a claim for £300 compensation for the damage caused for the ivy and the stress that it's caused me and my son. Please respond to this letter within 4 weeks, otherwise court proceedings may be commenced if there is no response, which may increase the amount of cost you are liable to pay. Yours faithfully, Mrs. Clell.
When I received the letter and read it, the first thing we did was laugh. But then I thought, you know, this woman has got some nerve.
I just couldn't believe anybody got the nerve to send a letter after all the aggravation we'd had and wanting money off us.
When it cost us £300 to have a new roof.
I'm thinking, like, this is a joke, isn't it?
The Reeds believed that they were perfectly within their rights to cut down the ivy in the first place.
It's doing nothing but damage. I'm not paying another £300 for another roof. But she's not bothered about that, Mrs. Clell, because Mrs. Clell doesn't have to pay anything to anyone because she's on benefits.
Marion is a full-time carer for her 33-year-old son, Jason, who suffers from a form of autism.
Me catlet.
As well as autism, Jason suffers from an anxiety disorder and OCD.
With my OCD, I tend to hoard things a lot and collect things, clothes and things I don't need. But unfortunately with my OCD, when I do get rid of the clothes, I tend to buy more back again. It's like a vicious circle really, and also I wash my hands a lot and check things a lot.
His life is basically dominated by hoarding things and washing over and over again, washing clothes and Pacific washing and checking. It's not a nice thing to live with and I have to deal with it the best I can. He just cannot cope with changes. Autistic people just cannot cope with changes. And he was very distressed and very, very upset about the state of the garden.
I've got every sympathy with someone who's got mental health issues.
But Jason wasn't giving us any problems. It was his mother.
The argument over the ivy had left their relationship in tatters. But this didn't deter Elaine and Tony from making further improvements to their garden.
Well, there used to be a really large shrub here, and when I first moved in, it was really tall, and I cut it down, and there was no objection. And every time it grew, I'd cut it back down.
And it was a lovely bush, and it come half on next door neighbour's garden and half on our garden. Come out in all yellow flowers, which were really, really beautiful.
But then it just went totally over there and covered that window completely.
One of the most important things, it gave me privacy for next door neighbour's garden. And my son used to like to draw it and paint it.
I like drawing the bush because it was quite relaxing. It relaxed my mind. It was very peaceful to draw and it was nice and colourful. It had lovely colourful flowers.
Every time I used to walk up the path, I used to think, what an eyesore. And so I'm getting rid of that bush, I'm having the doors painted and I'm having it landscaped.
Elaine arranged for a gardener to come and remove the large shrub and replace it with a small tropical palm. And one sunny August morning, he got down to work.
Jason was in his bedroom and he heard a really, really big noise, a big saw, going deep, deep, deep into the garden, taking out all the roots from the bush.
Unfortunately, he wasn't satisfied with just cutting it down. He had to uprooted the whole thing, and I was quite annoyed and angry and upset by it, really.
The gardener told us what happened next.
I could hear him shouting inside. I didn't take any notice at first, but then things started getting smashed around the house, and I could hear his mum telling him to stop it.
We both out here tidying up, and then we heard Mrs. Clell screaming and screaming, and then we heard Jason screaming and screaming, and I said to him, oh God, what's happened now?
And then I know I shouldn't have done it, like, things got so bad, like, I went in the kitchen and like took a knife and went outside and held it to him.
And then he came out with a knife, and he started attacking me with it. He just lunged at me, and then I got out of the way, and he kept coming at me.
The gardener was here in the middle of the garden, and Jason was facing him, doing that stabbing motions with the knife.
He was just about 2-3 feet away, and luckily I could just about dodge the knife.
Fearing for her gardener's safety, Elaine decided to take action.
Ran to the front door and said, "What the hell are you doing?" And he came with the knife in front of him like that. I couldn't believe it. I really could not believe it.
I went for a knife because I was quite upset with what happened with the bus, and I was quite depressed and that, and very anxious and frustrated by it.
I went, "Oh my God, he's got a knife," and I ran out.
And then she's opened the door and gone, what's going on? What are you doing? Like?
And Mrs. Reed come out the house and Jason pointed a knife at Mrs. Reed.
And he came from over there with the knife in front of him, and as he got to there, I slammed the front door.
And he was banging on the door with the knife, and he walked off and he went up the road and threw the knife away.
I couldn't believe that somebody was trying to stab me because they didn't like what I was doing to my own garden. I thought, I've got to get the police. I cannot, like, let this go. This is far too serious.
The police arrived moments later, but despite his ordeal, the gardener refused to give them a statement.
The police came and took him away. They said, "Do you want to press charges?" And I said, "Well, he's not a well man. I don't want to make it look like they're nasty people."
But later that day, police sniffer dogs found the discarded kitchen knife, and Jason was arrested. He was charged with possession of a blade in a public place and using threatening, abusive and insulting words.
The bush was actually in their garden. I do understand that, but it's difficult for Jason to understand that and picture that because of his autism.
But even though Jason was the one wielding the knife, the Reeds don't hold him responsible for what happened.
I said to the police at the time, it's his mother who sent him like this. And she obviously worked him into such a pitch that he totally lost it.
Autistic people just cannot cope with changes, and he was very distressed and very, very upset about it. What with the ivy taken away and then seeing that bush taken away, that's what started all this off. You know, that's what Jason's reactions were when all this happened.
Despite everything, the seriousness of Jason's actions meant he would still have his day in court.
I didn't intend on using it, like, you know, I wouldn't have used a knife. But I think what I did has been blown out of proportion a bit by the court and that, you know.
In October 2015, Jason appeared at Birmingham Crown Court, where he pleaded guilty to all charges. At the recommendation of his solicitor, the judge ordered Jason to spend 28 days in a probation hostel to have his mental health assessed before sentencing.
I think a custodial sentence would do Jason no good whatsoever. I think he needs some outside help to get him away from his mother.
He's always been with me because he's vulnerable, easy-led, and he won't be able to manage on his own. I know that for a fact. So I just want Jason to be as happy as he can in the house that we're living in. That's what me and Jason need. That's all we want, you know.
Since filming, Jason has been ordered to spend a full year in the probation hostel for continued assessment, in the hope that he'll be capable of living on his own in the near future. But after the encounter with his neighbours, he's finding it difficult to move on.
When I look outside now, I just see a bit, you know, it's like bare out there, there's no bus there, and I feel like a part of my life's been taken away from me, and a part of my mum's life has been taken away from her. Like, it's like my left arm's been taken away, you know.
Our home is our castle, and for many of us, it's a space where we show off who we really are. And we hope that who we really are doesn't annoy the neighbours. In Cheltenham, 51-year-old Russell Shermer, who works for a tool hire company, has been expressing his passions.
I like my American cars and American-themed items. This is my pride and joy. This is my little baby. It's a 1971 Ford Mustang Coupe. I've taken the stereo out of the car because the engine is the stereo. When you start the car up, you don't need to listen to anything else. It's a beautiful sound.
But it's in his back garden where Russell really shows off his personality.
I came here from a flat with obviously no garden to a house with a big garden, as you can see. It's just a great feeling to have your own space, so I could put my stamp on it. This is an area which I gravelled, then built a decking area just so we can have friends and family come round if I have a barbecue. Of all the things I can do, I do like building a structure.
Russell met Leo in 2006, and they moved to their new house in 2011, soon after getting married.
Wherever you go, some places you find people like you, some will not like you, but I thought everybody here welcomed us, and I thought people were friendly.
And no one was more friendly than the couple's next-door neighbour, 64-year-old George Clifton, with whom Russell discovered he shared a passion.
George and myself would often talk over the boundary fence and talk about each other's garden projects. Of all the neighbours that we've had around here, me and George, we got on really well.
George asked not to be shown in interview, but he agrees that he and Russell got on like a house on fire.
When Mr. Sherman moved in, he was very friendly. We gave him a set of 4 chairs and table, thinking being neighbourly, you know, to start them off, help them.
This is one of the gifts that George gave us as well. It's a nice heart-shaped flower pot, which I thought was very, very nice of him at the time.
But after 3 years of friendship, Russell Shermer says everything changed overnight.
On one evening, myself and Leo were out in the garden. I was stood down by the fence, and George was in his garden. George said to me that he wanted to replace his fence with a 6-foot-high fence. And when I asked George what was the issue, what was the problem, George said to me that, Russ, the problem's not with you. The problem, and he was pointing then at Leo, said the problem's with that thing over there.
That was awful. I said, you couldn't say that. That is bad. Definitely, it was upsetting. It was upsetting. Yeah, it was.
George Clifton, who works as a dog walker, has a totally different take on what happened.
I never made any comments about his partner, why we wanted to fence up. It was about the dogs. Greyhounds will jump 5 foot, no problem whatsoever. So we did not want them jumping over onto his property.
The Shermers couldn't work out what had triggered the insult.
Absolutely, completely out of the blue. I don't know the reasoning behind why he had suddenly changed towards Leo, because again, we'd got on so well. We never exchanged presents with anybody else. It was just solely us and them.
But in the weeks that followed, the couple claimed there were more incidents of what they felt were racist taunts.
He's done things of a racist nature, like buying his dog a gollywog toy and even changing his dog's name to the name of Blackie. To shout out, go on Blackie, get the gollywog.
No way am I racist at all. I would have never been able to work for London Transport for a start, because they don't stand anyone who's got any racial tendencies.
George denies that he changed the name of his dog or bought it a gollywog toy. But Russell Shermer says he has video footage which shows the kind of behaviour he was up against.
I'm sat down here with my tablet. George was next door with his dogs, just talking, doggy talk.
Bonnie, Grace. Bonnie.
I was recording at the time as well, and Leo was over in the kitchen.
Hold on, Grace.
Leo came out down the decking, walked down the decking, and you could hear George then next door talking to his dog, and he's made a comment.
There's no problem for him.
That's racist. Suddenly, this man was attacking Leo for the colour of her skin.
It's me, he didn't like it. It was me that was causing all this problem.
You know, I've got people here I've used who are coloured, repairing either my car or computer, you know. And if I was supposed to be racist, would I be using a coloured person? I don't think so.
But George admits that he did have a problem with next door, ever since Russell attached his prize pergola to George's fence.
As our fence was deteriorating, we wanted to replace it. When we come to ask Mr. Sherman to detach it from our fence so we could put a new fence up, he said no. Told him, I said, well, if you're not going to do it, then I'm going to have to remove it. And this is when the arguments all started.
3 years after Russell moved in, the situation between the neighbours was about to explode.
On a Saturday afternoon, I decided to do some more work on my fence. Because we've had 3 weeks of verbal abuse against Leo, every time I come into the garden, I've put my video recorder just in there. Just in case I'd had any comments made to me from George.
Russell claims the trouble began just as he pressed record.
What a big yellow-bellied coward.
And it was then Russell says he realised that this time, George wasn't going to stop at a verbal attack.
I then saw him walking down his path and said, I'm going to go and get the saw. You touch it and I'll kill you.
Go on.
Not proud of that comment, but it was at the heat of the moment. And at that point again, I didn't know exactly what he was going to do with the handsaw.
That is going to come off of that. That post is going to come off.
Tell you what. With his saw in his hand, he then goes to cut my post. And I'm physically pushing him away, and he then strikes the back of my hand with the saw blade. Enough to draw blood. If it wasn't for the washing line taking the force out of the blow, then it could have severed a couple of fingers.
But the argument wasn't over.
You want private property?
No! No! That is our fault! That's our property.
Well, I'm not having you for assault now anyway.
Didn't intend to cut him or nothing, just, he did actually grab the saw in the beginning, It
was a state of shock more than anything. So, 'cause I've never had a confrontation with anybody ever in my life. I've never hit anybody. I've never punched anybody. I'm not that sort of person.
That's my property.
Wounded by the saw blade, Russell called the police. By this time, George's partner Hazel had come down to the garden, and Russell's wife Leo had become aware of the disturbance.
I came down quickly, and as I came, I saw Russ just grabbing the phone from there, and he went out, and he was on the phone, and he's saying police. And then I looked at his hand, and I could see his hand bleeding.
Leo comes out of the house, out of the kitchen, comes round from the corner of the conservatory, at which point George and Hazel are still in the back garden.
With Russell's tablet still recording, Leo now became the target from next door.
Oh, there's the black cow. Oh, there's the gollywog.
I didn't say something immediately because I was like, this is serious, I thought. But then, if I had to say something, it could have been massive, me shouting and all that, but I just kept quiet. When he said that, I didn't say anything.
Don't forget, it's all being videoed. At that point, I said to George that he's being filmed and that he's racist. He said, no, not one bit.
Listen to this, you dog.
Nothing wrong to you. Don't shout.
Just listen to
Don't
this.
shout at me, please.
Shut your black mouth. Without thinking, I just used a few unseen words. I did call her, I think it was a gollywog, but you're not allowed to use the word gollywogs now, all black. And I just thought, well, heat of the moment, they ain't going to worry, but they've taken it as I'm racist.
Shocked by the outburst, the Shermers asked the Cliftons what had happened to their friendship. It was only then that George and Hazel came out with their grievance.
Why have you had 3 years of everything being okay?
Because we talked to the neighbour.
Because she's been listening to her over the road.
What did she tell me wrong?
Just listen to me a minute.
We've got friends elsewhere. What's it of yours?
I must have friends.
Well, we know what friends are.
It seemed that the Cliftons were upset about the Shermers' relationships with some of the other neighbours.
Maybe it's because we were friends with other people that he didn't like that and he wanted us just for himself. But, it was very, very strange as to how it all unfolded.
Because of Russell's video evidence, George Clifton was convicted of assault by beating against his neighbour. He also pleaded guilty to racially aggravated harassment of Leo. He was fined £430.
At that point, we did ask the judge for a restraining order to keep George away from us, but the judge did say, you're both grown adults, you should be able to act accordingly.
But the judge's words weren't going to put an end to the trouble.
I've got a 6-foot fence, George has got a 6-foot fence, and we now have like a 4-inch no man's land between our properties.
But Russell claims that George has resorted to other ways to get at him, and the dispute has turned into a childish water fight.
George will go out and water his plants, but he tends to like to water my vehicles as well. Some people might think, oh, well, he's doing you a favour, but when you water someone's vehicle and you don't wash it and then it dries, it leaves a water stain all over your vehicle.
I did not deliberately water his car. The car is a matter of inches from the borderline. Bit of wind as you're watering, the water's going to spray everywhere.
He once just confronted. He did it so many times he could be, and that could say, God, I'm going outside to tell him to stop doing this. I said, no, just leave him.
But George says it's Russell that won't let it lie.
Russell Sherman's come up to me the one after the court case. I will not stop until I get you put away. We can't go out in our garden at times without knowing they might be recording everything we say. We can be talking to ourselves.
And as the bickering goes on, there are signs that the situation could explode again.
A few days ago, I had a phone call to say this is the Gloucestershire police and that they had my neighbour in custody. And I said, oh, what's he done now? They'd informed me that he had spoken to a third party and informed them that he planned to damage my house, but with my wife inside.
George claims he'd been trying to explain to a nurse at his GP surgery why his stress levels were so high.
The nurse, she said, oh, your blood pressure's gone sky high, because I normally suffer with low blood pressure and everything. Yeah, I'm getting worked up about Mr. Sherman again. I said, someone's got to do something about him. One of these days, someone's going to put a petrol bomb through his window or something. He'd go upset so many people. She had to report it to the police.
The police searched George Clifton's house for weapons, but took no further action. Tensions in the once peaceful suburb remain high.
If only we could have known this is what it was going to be like, I don't think we could have moved here.
All we want to do is go to work, come home, relax. But we can't do that because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. It's just a waiting game now to see what else triggers George off.
Life's coming unbearable with him. Everything he seems to do, he wants me to react. I'm not sure how much longer I can take without reacting.
In a block of flats, you never know what's happening behind your neighbour's closed door.
She have ruined my life. She have. She have just gone and destroyed it all for me.
Or what might be in store for you.
I never thought for 1 minute that she would be harbouring her in a secret like that.
In April 2015, 44-year-old Michelle James found the perfect new home in the former mining town of Neighbour in South Wales.
I thought, you know, what a nice area, what a nice snow block of flats, you know what I mean? I looked through the window, I phoned the council, I said I will take it straight away.
After a difficult relationship with an ex-partner, Michelle was looking forward to starting afresh, enjoying her new freedom to the full.
My friends think I'm a bit of an a prankster, I like to mean game for a laugh and I'll have a laugh. So when I seen this, I thought, when the girls walk in, turn the light off, switch on, look at that, girls. Fun this way, reckon that's me or what?
But while she was still moving in, Michelle got her first warning that her new life wasn't going to be quite the barrel of laughs she'd been hoping for.
I was sorting out my kitchen and everything. I leaned towards the window and to open the window, like that. It was open that much. I turned around, carried on doing what I was doing, and then next minute there was a voice shouting, what the f*** are you doing in that flat? Turned round, I was startled, and I said, excuse me? My window was wide open by that time, and her head was in through my window.
Michelle James had just met her upstairs neighbour, former nurse Lee Sabine, who had moved in 1997 and was well known to other residents.
She was always jolly, always well-dressed, and, you know, she was full on. Oh, darling, how are you, darling? Very touchy-feely with the men.
And in the block which Michelle had moved into, neighbours say Lee Sabine was Queen Bee.
I said to Michelle when she moved in, careful of her now. I warned her. She can be a nasty piece of work. They called her the Black Widow because she used to wear a black glove on this hand. She more or less thought that she could just rule everybody around here, if you know what I mean. She's a nightmare neighbour, always was.
Feeling under attack from her new neighbour, only hours after moving in, Michelle James tried to prevent the situation from escalating.
No normal person comes and does that. Maybe knock your front door and introduce yourself our way, but not through someone's kitchen window. I said, this is my flat. So I grabbed the window then and shut the window. So then I walked then from the kitchen into my living room. So I started hoovering in here. Then all of a sudden then I heard knock, knock, knock on the door. Letterbox, shouting, I know you're in there, open the door. She kept on knocking and I shut the door and I just chucked the hoover down and I sat down on the floor. And I was thinking to myself, what have I moved into?
Michelle refused to answer the door, but Lee wouldn't give up.
She sent a letter through my door then that day saying, this is my block, I've lived here all these years and whatever. And all that, and I thought, what's going on? Like, I mean, why is she writing all stuff like this to me? What have I done to her? I've done nothing to her.
And in the weeks that followed, Michelle was to get dozens more letters telling her she wasn't welcome. After she complained to the council, her neighbour got a warning. But Lee Sabine took no notice.
There was one morning I got up and on Sunday, I could see a letter coming through the letterbox, and I thought, hang on, postman don't come on a Sunday. So I grabbed the letter, opened the front door. I told you, any more of this now, and the council going to take further action. I had the letter in this hand, shaking it, waving it, and saying, right, that's it now, because I've had just about enough of you now. She tried to snatch the letter back out of my hand, and I was like shaking it, you know, you're not having this is going through the council. So I just shut my door. Walked in my flat and thought, well, whoa, I don't want to live here anymore, sort of thing, do you know what I mean?
Michelle was shaken by the encounter, but it wasn't over yet.
Walked to my bedroom. Next thing I know, I turned round and she was just standing there. And I said, what the are you doing in my flat? Get out now. She was standing there as if to say, no, I'm not. I'll stand here if I want to stand here. I said, you won't. You get the out of my flat now. Now get out, I was screaming. I was going nuts for her. She opened the door and I slammed the door behind her. I thought she was crazy, to be honest with you. I thought the council has put me somewhere where there's someone crazy, like, do you know what I mean?
But Michelle James had no idea who she was dealing with.
I always felt that Lee had a secret life. Don't ask me how I know that. It was just an hunch that I had.
She's a devil, as far as I'm concerned. She's done my head in. I've had nightmares and everything because of her.
She interfered. The woman upstairs she interfered with. The other people moved because of her. They'd had enough of her. They couldn't put up with her antics.
Fearing she might be driven from her home by the escalating hostility, Michelle decided on a change of tactics.
I came in then one day. The lady was walking halfway up the stairs and I said, excuse me, I said, please may I have a word with you? Don't you think this has gone on long enough now? Can we resolve this ourselves?
And the response from Lee Sabine was as surprising as her initial hostility had been.
And she turned round to me and she said, yes, darling, she said. Coming up, she said. So I went up, she gave me a touch, a kiss on the cheek and that. She said, I said, I'm so glad you can be friends and that now. Well, I said, that's all I ever wanted when I moved in here, do you know what I mean? I didn't want all these nasty letters off you and everything. And obviously that made me feel a lot better then, rather than it carry on, because it was just doing my head in.
And within weeks, the relationship between the neighbours was to be completely transformed after Michelle discovered that Lee was suffering from a cancer of the brain.
So obviously then I thought then she was just writing me them letters because that brain cancer was playing tricks with her mind. So I started then caring for her with other people as well. We all cared for her. Be up there by 7, making her a cup of tea, then dress her, and I take food up for her. You know, doing normal things like normal neighbour would do, that.
I was very surprised that Michelle bent and looked after Lee the way she did, because I can tell you, if she treated me like it, there's no way I would have helped her. No way on this earth.
But shortly after they made peace, former nurse Lee's illness took a turn for the worse. And Michelle and her neighbours say they noticed more erratic behaviour.
One day Lee mentioned that she had a medical skeleton.
It did freak me a bit, and she said, oh, for goodness sake, it's part of nurse training. And I said, well, it's odd for her to speak like that. She don't normally speak so abrupt.
So I said to her, I was coming up to Halloween, and I said, can I borrow this medical skeleton? I said. She said, you leave her alone and don't you go near it. She went really nasty towards it, like.
I said, I hope it's not a real body. And she said to me, all will be revealed, darling. And she took a drink of her wine. And I said, you're freaking me out now. I'm going home.
On the day before Halloween 2015, Lee Sabine lost her battle with cancer and died in hospital. With the flowers from her cremation, Michelle decided to make a final gesture of friendship for her upstairs neighbour.
There was a few of us that bought the flowers. I said, what I'm going to do, girls, is I'm going to do like a memorial garden and put them out the back, for Lee.
But Michelle says it was while she and a friend were beginning work on the memorial garden that she noticed that some of Lee's belongings had been stacked outside when her flat had been cleared.
I placed the flowers down, turned obviously to walk back in, noticed there was something different in the garden.
Among Lee's belongings was a large plastic-wrapped package and, by its size and shape, Michelle guessed the contents.
I thought that must be the medical skeleton. Well, a couple of days later then, me and a friend was going to play a practical joke about this medical skeleton and put it on the chair and say, this is my new boyfriend or whatever.
But the practical joke was to backfire in a terrifying way.
So we come out, 2 of us did, and we cutting it open. And as we cut it open, I said to the girl, I'll hold that part, and you cut, and then all this sludge stuff come out. And I said, that's no skeleton. I said, that's a dead body. I was screaming, running with 2 knives in my hand, running into my house with all this sludge. I was covered up to here in this sludge, and I was washing my hands and everything, and then I rang my support worker. She answered. I said, look, don't think I've gone crazy now, I said, but there's a dead body out the back, and she burst out laughing on the phone. And I said, I don't think this is funny, like, do you know what I mean? They must have thought I was messing about. My housing officer was rubbing my back and saying, calm down now, keep calm, keep calm. And I was shouting, keep calm, there's a dead body out the back, there's a dead body out the back.
Lo and behold, I heard that there was a body found outside the flat. I thought, it's not a body, it's just a skeleton.
And the forensics were out there, police cars and police vans out there, and I thought, how stupid are they? What a waste of money. All this for a skeleton. And I said, it's good practice for them when they do find a real body in there.
Only hours later did it become clear that Michelle James had been right. The package in the garden was not a medical skeleton, but the decomposed body of an unidentified man with a head injury consistent with a blunt force trauma.
It makes me feel if I just want to be sick. Because I can smell the smell, and the smell haven't left me, like, do you know what I mean? I got to go in now because I'm getting really agitated now.
But despite the shattering experience, Michelle's day was about to get even worse.
So this CID come closer to me and she said, I'm arresting you, she said, on suspicion of murder. I said, you're having a laugh now, I know I said, do you know what I mean? And that's the expression I used. And then it was all just went blank.
When I found out that Michelle had been arrested for the murder, no way. You know, she's loud, she's bubbly and that, but I don't think she knew it to fly.
For Michelle, the investigation that followed was devastating.
Being shown pictures of a man's head being caved in an interview, that traumatised me, and it's going to traumatise me for the rest of my life. They went to my ex-partners to see if they were alive and all stuff like that, do you know what I mean?
It took 4 days before Michelle was allowed to go back to her flat, but she was still suffering the after effects of her experience.
Ever since my hands touched the contents of that bag, I'm washing my hands constant all the time, but I can still smell the smell of that body, do you know what I mean? It's done my head in, like, do you know what I mean? That really freaked me out, like, do you know what I mean?
Worse still, Michelle says she was living under a cloud of suspicion.
I come home, I was coming across the road, and a bloke down the road said, "Oh, look, that's her, look, that's the murderer, look, who lives in our flat."
It wasn't until 2 weeks after Michelle's release that South Wales Police announced the information that would finally clear her. The body had been identified as that of John Sabine, Lee's husband, who had disappeared in 1997, the year that Lee had moved in. Nobody knew how long it had been in the garden.
I wasn't even aware that she'd ever had a husband. It was just a massive shock.
How can somebody kill somebody, right, and live with that all them years and take it to their deathbed, and then leave other people then get arrested and other people's lives turned upside down? It's disgusting.
I couldn't live with it. I couldn't live with knowing that I'd done something like that and go out the front and smile.
While the circumstances surrounding John Sabine's death may never be known, Mrs. Sabine confessed to a friend that she had bludgeoned her husband to death with a stone frog.
I just want to get out of this flat as soon as I can. I want to live in my own place, but I won't be associating with any neighbour or nothing ever again. That woman has destroyed my life because I got no trust in no one now. Do you know what I mean? I'll never be able to trust anybody now because I don't know what they're doing.
She always said that she would be famous one day, that everybody would know it. Well, she is famous now, isn't she?
Pensioners David and Glenys Booth moved to the historic market town of Chesterfield 25 years ago.
We moved here because it seemed a nice area and we thought it'd be a nice place to settle for our old age, really.
Famous for the Church of St Mary and All Saints with its twisted spire, the town promised to be the quiet home they dreamed of.
It was lovely. The guy that lived here was quiet, friendly. They looked after my cat while we were on holiday, and it was really just a nice place to be. Yes, you've had your tuna. This isn't for you.
In 2001, there were some new arrivals in the cul-de-sac. An ex-boxing coach and his family moved into the house on the corner of the Booths Drive.
We had a new neighbour arrive with 2 young boys, and the children used to run about in the close and go on people's gardens that we hadn't been used to before. We were always told to respect other people's property, and we began to realise that they weren't the same sort of neighbour that we were used to.
And Glenys had other concerns.
The bushes here were hanging over the drive and catching the car. They belonged to the new neighbour, and I thought it was polite to go and ask if I could cut them back. And I was told in no uncertain terms that I couldn't, and I would have to wait until he wanted them doing. He said, "You've got plenty of room on your drive." I realised then that it wasn't going to be an easy ride for us.
Determined to clear her drive, but not wanting to make a fuss, Glenys trimmed the bushes herself.
I thought I was being neighbourly and doing a favour.
Bushes dealt with, the couple felt their neighbour was blocking their drive in other ways.
This is the sort of thing he does. He'd put his bins out and he'll make sure they're over our drive to stop us getting out with the car. We have to remove them so that we can now get out of our own property.
Their neighbour denies all of Glennis's allegations and recalls things differently. His words are voiced by an actor.
At no time, in all the years I've lived there, have I heard of a wheelie bin issue. The Booths have never discussed this with me in that time, and considering we regarded each other as friends, I find this comment bizarre.
He admits when he first moved in, the Booths did make a scene about his bush, which was witnessed by others on the street.
It was hanging over their drive by 2 inches. But, you know, if that bothered them, I would respect their feelings and keep my plant levels within the boundary.
With the Booths taking care of their driveway, an uneasy peace settled on the street, and their neighbour says he was not aware of any other problems with his neighbours. But one evening, after a trip to town, the Booths got the shock of their lives.
We came in, it was bright. It was like daylight in here. It was a 400 or 500 watt floodlight that was shining directly into our lounge. I couldn't believe how bright it was. It just lit the place up. Well, I went straight to the window and pulled the curtains over to block it out because it was so bright, it was blinding, in fact.
The light seemed to be coming from the neighbour's back garden, and it stayed on until 11:30 p.m.
This is where the light was installed. It was installed there, and it was so hot, it burnt a hole straight through the trellis. My personal view is that the only reason you could put a light like that was no good to yourself was to intimidate us, to make us uncomfortable and make us feel that he was taking charge of us.
I did have a halogen light on my decking for washing and cleaning our mountain bikes after winter rides, which is every week. It was too hot and I replaced it the next day with a different one. I don't see how the Booths think that was about them.
Feeling the spotlight into their front room was harassment. Glennis called the police, who told her to log any threatening behaviour. With the light removed, Glennis said her neighbour then invaded their space in a new way.
I came home from town one day, got to the end of the drive. What's here? Part of a shed. And at that moment I saw him going round the corner of his house, and I thought, oh yeah, it's got to be something to do with him. Proceeding to erect a shed on the side of his property. But this is our drive, right up to the end of here, and this is his property, is where the pebbles are there. The only way that you could obviously get into this is to use our property to access it. What happens if one of the cars is here, a visitor or anybody, or we've got a van or something here? You can't do it. It's not possible.
The neighbour says he found his neighbour's reaction surprising.
They both charged out, wagging fingers angrily and shouting about the access. I was shocked, as this was the first crossword I'd had with them in 15 years. They went away and returned with a piece of paper.
I came out with the document that we'd received to prove that it's our property and handed them to him, whereupon he screwed them up, threw them back at me and said, "It might interest you, it doesn't me."
But that wasn't the end of it. The neighbour wanted to explain why he needed to use their driveway.
They listened quietly at the door until I'd finished and then shouted, "There will be no compromise," and then slammed the door shut.
But the Booths remember the confrontation differently.
He said, "Look, I don't want to fall out with you, but I need to use that, I need more space."
But Glennis was determined to keep her driveway private and firmly stood her ground.
And we said, "No, we haven't got our permission." And he said, "You want the neighbour from hell, you've got him," and stormed off. to threaten to be a neighbour from hell, you don't know what to expect from someone. And so we were worried and scared because who knows what it could do.
The Booths decided they needed to keep a watch over their property 24 hours a day and installed 4 CCTV cameras.
Here's our neighbour coming down the drive to check the cameras out.
And that's when we saw these thumbs up, as much as to say, well, you're never going to stop me doing this. I will continue.
Their neighbour carried on using their driveway to access his shed. The Booths had had enough.
We went to see the solicitor and explained what had happened. He told us he was trespassing, it was not allowed, it was our property solely. So the solicitor wrote to him and told him that he had to either remove it or modify the shed, so he didn't use our property.
6 weeks later, their neighbour wrote back to the Booths solicitor. He claimed that his sheds would only be there temporarily.
And he replied with a letter full of lies and waffle, really.
Their neighbour told us what Mrs. Booth claims was waffle was him questioning their motive for installing so many CCTV cameras, and says he was confused by the Booths' sudden possessiveness over their drive.
For 15 years prior, I had tended plants down the side of my house and front garden with no access issues.
The Booths said their neighbour made his feelings about the CCTV very clear.
As soon as we opened the curtains, that is staring at us, as you can see, right in front of your eyes. It's an eyesore. It looks awful. You're looking at me, I'm looking at you, but in a different manner. And that's what that's all about, as far as I'm concerned. But look at it, it's an absolute eyesore.
I have placed another fence panel up to try and stop what their cameras can film for my own privacy. It's all I had in the garden at the time, as it was what my sons used for archery practice.
But it wasn't long before there was something else concerning Mr. and Mrs. Booth. After returning home from a game of darts, David Booth noticed another neighbour's bin was very close to his boundary.
When I got to this point here, the bin was here, the green bin, and it had been moved from a position over there to the edge here. And when I saw it, I found it quite upsetting, and considered it very childish. So I banged it 3 or 4 times. And then I shouted up to the windows, and I shouted childish.
So I went and I said, come on, David, that's not like you, come in.
The owner of the bin ignored David's banging, but one of their other neighbours was quick to respond.
I noticed that the light was on outside.
Dragged the bin across and deliberately threw it at our car, bumped it, he kept hold of it, bumped it into the car. And I thought, what the hell is he doing? Why is he doing that?
He started making gestures for me to come outside and come and fight me. And so I actually put 2 fingers up to him, and he came across to the window looking very aggressive and went hard on this window. He was hitting it that hard, I thought the window was going to come in. He wanted me to fight him. I'm 70-year-old and he's like 46 or 7 or something, and he wants to fight me.
And then, of course, I just went outside. I said, what do you think you're doing? The next thing I know, I grabbed the wheelie bin, spun it round, threw it at me. Just missed me. And I said, why did you throw the bin at me? And he said, I didn't. I was in total shock. Well, he came at me like a raging bull, wild and angry. I put my hands up to stop him because I was sure that he was going to headbutt me. And the next thing I know, he pushed me violently and he threw me to the ground.
I did not bang their window or come out like a raging bull. All of those were disproved in court by their own CCTV.
I fell very heavily, obviously. I wasn't expecting to go down. I banged my head on the paving slabs.
She didn't bang her head. Their CCTV shows that. I then tried to help her up, which she refused, which is also on their CCTV.
I bruised my left buttock. I had bruising to this arm and cuts on my fingers.
Their neighbour claims his actions were in self-defence.
I put my hands behind my back and she grabbed my throat. You know, I pushed her hands away and she fell over. She claims I pushed her over.
As Glenys's sister-in-law rushed to her aid, their neighbour's partner tried to drag him away.
He wasn't shocked, he wasn't sorry. He was out to get somebody that night and it happened to be me. I was dazed, I was in shock. And my husband sat up half the night with me because I'd hit my head badly.
The immediate reaction was disgust. Disgust that somebody had attacked a pensioner, a lady in her 70th year. What kind of man would do that? I can only feel disgust for that person.
The police came out, took a statement from me, took photographs of my bruising and injuries.
Their neighbour was questioned by police and released on bail. But he continued to use the booth's driveway and was caught on their CCTV cameras.
He still continued to use our property. He just doesn't seem to want to let up at all.
4 months later, her neighbour was charged with assault, which he denied. And in December 2015, his trial came to court.
They said I'd attacked him and he was protecting himself. I mean, you've only got to look at the width of him. How could I possibly do anything to hurt him?
With the booth's CCTV footage as evidence, their neighbour was found guilty of assault by beating and given 60 hours community service. He also had to pay Glenys £100 compensation and was given a restraining order, meaning he can't contact her directly or indirectly for a year.
I'm worried that when the year finishes, that he'll start a campaign again against me. And what can I do about that? I think 1 year was, well, certainly not enough in my mind. We've been going through this for over a year anyway. And just to give him a year then, well, not very good at all. I'm very disappointed.
Whilst their neighbour accepts the verdict of the court, he still considers the booth's CCTV cameras to be invasive and feels the booths go out of their way to provoke a response from him.
We are living next door to two people who are on a campaign to make our lives hell.
But the booths claim the assault has taken a heavy toll on them and changed the way they feel about a street they've called home for 25 years.
Oh, I tremble. I tremble. I can't wait to get inside my own front door. I feel that someone has to be with me all the time now. I'm afraid to go far on my own because who knows what he might do.
In a secluded cul-de-sac in the suburbs of Bury, Lancashire, neighbours have built firm friendships and strong community ties.
I've lived on this street for 39 years. It's always been a quiet street and a very friendly community. Everybody's always there to look after one another. It's just, in general, a very nice area.
Then in 2001, 48-year-old Oliver Fogey moved into the street.
Hi, Joel. All right.
One of the first neighbours he introduced himself to was John Deacon, who noticed a strange presence about him.
I'd just come back from the supermarket. A man come out, he introduced himself as Oliver, and I said, hello, I'm John. He wouldn't stand still. He was sort of on edge. A bit sensitive, something was going to snap, and it did worry me. So I thought, if it does snap, you know, what's he going to do?
Oliver as a neighbour was strange size for a man. Kept himself to himself, really, and just potted about in the garden, and we didn't really see much of him.
And it wasn't long before the uneasy feeling turned to unusual behaviour. Neil Croker, who lived 4 doors down from Oliver, realised some of his plants had gone missing from the front of his house. He didn't have to go far to find them.
I came out and I looked over and I thought, there were my plants, planted in Oliver's garden. I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it.
Neil didn't feel comfortable approaching the new neighbour himself, so reported the incident to the Housing Association, who look after all of the properties in the street.
They said, who was it? And when I explained to them, they said, well, don't go near him, we will sort it out. I was a bit surprised, really. A bit surprised. But they didn't want me to go and knock on his door.
Relieved to get his plants back, Neil didn't question why he was told not to confront Oliver himself. At the other end of the street, 80-year-old Audrey Copperthwaite, who'd lived here since 2005, hadn't had any dealings with Oliver until the day her daughter, May Lynn, moved next door to him in 2010.
Well, we were moving May Lynn's furniture in, and the van driver had brought his van up onto the grass. Well, the van was stuck in the grass, and next thing we know, May Lynn's neighbour came out and came up to the doorway and started telling this man to put a plank, a piece of wood or something underneath the wheel.
Audrey didn't take kindly to Oliver's attempt to interfere and had a sixth sense that something wasn't quite right about his attitude.
He just thought he could take over and run the show. I wasn't going to let him. He just looked at me and kind of went off in a huff back to his place.
Little did Audrey know that she and May Lynn had made a mortal enemy of their new neighbour.
He was definitely annoyed and didn't like being told that we could manage for ourselves. It's like anywhere you get the odd one that doesn't fit in really, but that's as it is. That's life in general.
Oliver's behaviour had already aroused suspicion on the street. When he visited John Deacon one day, he dropped a bombshell that would strike fear into the heart of the community.
He'd come in at first, it might be, I know he was into country and western, he'd be talking about that, or football, anything like that, but after 2 to 3 minutes, that stopped. And it sort of took me by surprise. He told me he'd been inside and what he'd done for it, you know, he'd beat people up, he'd been in fights, and it was like an honour for him. And I thought, well, if he's capable of that and he don't show any remorse, and I thought, well, if he starts on me, I've no chance.
Rumours of Oliver's past spread like wildfire through the neighbourhood and caused particular concern for 80-year-old Audrey Copperthwaite and her daughter May Lynn, who'd just moved in next door to him.
His whole attitude, his whole body language was very offensive. We were both scared of what he might do.
Disabled 52-year-old May Lynn had recently been seriously ill and had moved to the cul-de-sac so that her mum could help to look after her.
If we went out, we both went out together. We're more like soulmates than mother and daughter.
Audrey and May Lynn had already had one run-in with Oliver Fogey on the day May Lynn moved in. It wasn't long before they clashed again.
She hadn't been in only a couple of days, and a couple of young men came up to put some pictures on her ledge.
But next door, Oliver heard the pictures being put up and wasn't happy about the noise.
It was only 7 o'clock in the evening, and he came and started bawling about that. And as soon as he saw the 2 young men, he went back. He thought because it was 2 women, he could bully us. but I wasn't going to let him beat me.
A few doors down, neighbour Joan Band had noticed Oliver's behaviour becoming more erratic, and that he'd started to become aggressive towards people knocking on his door.
I did start to notice his behaviour was getting stranger because, and at one stage I remember him chasing a man down the street with his leaflets and throwing them at him. He said he didn't want them in his house and blah, blah, blah. He didn't ask for them and he chased him off. Things like that I noticed was more strange than normal.
John Deakin knew Oliver better than most of the other neighbours. Oliver was a frequent visitor, and John noticed that the conversation always seemed to come round to the same subject: his deep dislike of his next-door neighbour, May Lynn, and her mother, Audrey.
He'd always stand here, and it was like, you know, he was rocking and he was looking through into the kitchen and started going on about the neighbours, and that's all it was with him. Just incessant with him.
Oliver made it clear to anyone in the street who would listen that he wanted May Lynn out of the flat next door, and made regular complaints about May Lynn and Audrey to the housing association.
He really started virtually from day one, and he didn't let up with one complaint after complaint after complaint. He went and complained that she was using a microphone in the house, and she had a hole in the wall and the air was going through and making his place cold. Very, very stupid things.
Oliver had a real problem with the slightest sound from next door, and his biggest gripe was about the loud barking of May Lynn's dog, Charlie. Matters came to a head in September 2012 when Audrey and May Lynn received a visit from the housing association.
I was just coming out of May Lynn's property to take the dogs a walk when these two ladies had come to the door asking were there any dogs barking around.
Oliver was watching events unfold from next door and couldn't stop himself from getting involved.
He came out of his bungalow that was to the right of May Lynn's, across the lawn to me and the two young ladies that were there. And he came so close to me, he was like that, virtually in my face, no more than 6-7 inches away, shouting about the dog, calling that he got no peace, he was entitled to be comfortable in peace. Didn't matter about anybody else, as long as he had his peace. And I'm certain that if the girls hadn't been there, I'm certain he'd have hit me.
Neighbour John Deakin was becoming increasingly anxious about Oliver's behaviour and his violent track record.
It was getting to a stage where I was hiding in my bedroom or in the kitchen because I had a rough idea what time we were coming. I was a bit worried. I thought, well, if I do say something to him, is he going to kick off? You know, because he was a lot bigger than me anyway.
John's growing unease drove him to take drastic action when he suspected Oliver wanted to pay him a visit.
As soon as I seen his reflection in the mirror, what he used to do was lie down flat as possible on the settee, so he couldn't see me, hopefully. If he come knocking, I just lay there quiet, because I didn't want him coming in my house.
Oliver's anger increasingly turned to his disabled next-door neighbour, May Lynn Copperthwaite, and her mother, Audrey, who lived around the corner and would visit daily to care for her daughter. She claims that Oliver's behaviour towards them gradually became more intimidating.
He'd come out to the bins, he'd look at me, and he'd start banging each one as he went, kind of thing. And then he'd turn around and stare at me as I went past, with such an evil look in his eye.
Oliver's aggressive behaviour towards Audrey and May Lynn was witnessed by the other neighbours.
I remember one day I could hear raised voices, very loud raised voices, and I looked across to where Oliver lived, and Audrey and Oliver were there, and he was shouting at her very, very loud, and he was sounding very, very angry. Audrey said she was having problems with Oliver. She just said that he was giving them hell.
Audrey and Mei Lin complained to the housing association about Oliver's behaviour. Even though Mei Lin was offered alternative accommodation, she decided to stay put, so she could be close to her mother.
Mei Lin was frightened of him, but she tried to ignore it because she didn't want to move. But I wish she had. I really do.
A few doors away, John Deakin was concerned that Oliver's attitude towards Audrey and Mei Lin was becoming increasingly irrational.
We were going to my car and then he come running over and he said, "Have you seen what she's done to her car?" So I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Look at the wing mirrors." And the doctor said, "Yeah, she turned them in." I said, "You're just trying to protect him." But he said there was a camera in the car which was then able to spy on his front door and record whatever. And I said, "No, it don't work like that, Oliver." I said, "She just turned the wing mirrors in to protect the car." But he was adamant she was spying on him.
Audrey and Mei Lin were also disturbed by the extremely close attention that Oliver had started paying.
He would come and stand on the grass directly outside the living room window, probably 2 or 3 feet away from the window itself, and he'd just stare in at us, no matter what we were doing. And that's what he would do quite repeatedly. He was scary. The man was scary.
In January 2016, out of the blue, Oliver confronted Audrey with another random complaint about the noise from Mei Lin's bungalow next door.
He complained about the fan in the bathroom was causing his arms and his legs to ache. Her bathroom, getting into his place. And I said to him, "I can't see how that can be." Pacify him. I said I would get on to the social services. Social services, there's nothing to do with bloody social services. Your daughter's got a bloody machine in there. I said, "Oh God, we're at that again now." And I walked away.
Having boasted of his violent criminal past, the neighbours were getting increasingly alarmed by Oliver's erratic behaviour and doing their best to avoid him at all costs. But one day, Joan Band found herself trapped when he cornered her at a bus stop and started on a familiar topic.
He started talking about Audrey and Mei Lin, and he said that he was annoyed with Mei Lin because she was playing loud music. He was fed up with it. He couldn't hear his television for it. And he also thought she was tapping into his electricity, which I thought was very strange. And then the last thing he said was, I'll kill him. But I really didn't think he was going to do. I just thought he'd lost his marbles, actually. Just things in general didn't make sense what he was saying.
As Oliver spiralled into paranoia, Audrey was now on red alert and started to take desperate measures to protect her disabled daughter, Mei Lin.
When I came out of there every time, I would lock her in because I was afraid of what he might do. If the door was open or anything, he might go in and assault her in some way or other. I was petrified every day that he would do something. And as I say, I didn't expect him to do what he did do.
Audrey would pop around to help Mei Lin with her everyday chores. And Sunday, the 7th of February 2016, was like any other.
And about 5:15, I was going to come home to get my tea and spend the evening at home.
But as Audrey was on Mei Lin's doorstep, Oliver ran towards the house.
I was just leaving Mei Lin's and she shouted, "Mum, he's coming." I then saw him coming underneath the window, and the next thing I know, he was at the doorway and he came straight to the step, and I saw the knife in his hand.
Audrey was overwhelmed with panic.
It was too quick to think anything very much. I just said, "Ring the police, darling, he's got a knife." I felt him stab me, and the next thing I know, I'd fallen flat onto the floor.
Audrey was critically wounded and paralysed with fear, but Oliver wasn't finished.
He went over me into the house to Merlin. I knew he was going for her next. I didn't hear her say a word after she said, "He's coming, Mum." Then on his way out, he stabbed me in my arm.
Audrey saw Oliver leave the flat. She couldn't move or find out what he'd done to Mei Lin, but she had one chance to call for help when she felt her mobile in her pocket.
As I lay on the floor, I managed to get it out, and I dialed 999.
Police and paramedics rushed to the scene, and neighbour John ran out to see what was going on.
When I got to here, I seen Audrey at the door, lay down. My first thought was that he'd punched her. I just thought he'd punched her mother. The police at Oliver's, they battered his door down. They had the battering ram, and I think they hit the door once or twice, and the door flew open, and that's when they told Oliver to come out with his hands up and get on his knees, else he'd be tasered. And he did come out and he dropped to his knees and they put the handcuffs on him, and that's when they threw him in the police van.
Word soon got out that a serious incident had unfolded on the close.
I rang a neighbour. "What's happening?" And she said there's been a stabbing in the street. Merlin had been stabbed and Audrey had been stabbed, and they didn't know how Audrey was at that stage.
Then the ambulance crews arrived. One of the ambulance crews said, she's gone. I thought he meant Merlin, so I said, what's that? And they said, "Oh, nothing.
Audrey had been stabbed 4 times by Oliver Fogey. In a life-threatening condition, with wounds to her stomach and chest, she was rushed straight to hospital for surgery. Mei Lin had also been brutally stabbed 4 times by Oliver and was treated by paramedics in her home. When Audrey woke up after her surgery 2 days later, her worst fears about Mei Lin were confirmed.
She died up in the hospital. My daughter's gone.
News of the tragedy left this peaceful community reeling.
I think it was a shock that you'd hear the murders going on virtually every day, but when it's right next door to you or in the same street, it's a different reaction when it's so close. And I think a few people would probably think, well, it could have been me.
After 2 months in hospital, Audrey returned to her home in April 2016, and the local community have helped her through the darkest months.
All the neighbours have been very good. There was about 4 or 5 of them came to see me. I wouldn't have come back after the sad event if I hadn't been happy here and with good people around us.
Oliver Fogey was charged with murder and attempted murder. A trial date was set for July 2016. Still healing from her injuries, Audrey was determined to face her attacker in court.
Oh yes, we saw it. He was in a glass box and he tried to stare himself out and the other people that were with me. He didn't succeed. He had to turn away in the end because we all stared at him.
But Audrey was spared the ordeal of testifying in court. Evidence was shown that Oliver was suffering from paranoid schizophrenia at the time of the attack. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter and wounding with intent.
The judge said to him before she left the court, she says, "No matter what sentence I hand down to you, you're going to be out of circulation for a very, very long time."
In September 2016, Oliver was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 10 years. Audrey is slowly coming to terms with life on her own. But Mei Lin is never far from her thoughts.
Mei Lin bought me this, a few years ago for my birthday, I think. And last year for my birthday, she bought me a watch. And on the back it has inscribed, "I love you, Mum." I can't believe it. I can't put that on. Nobody can replace Maitland.
On the south coast of England, Bournemouth was once marketed as a spa resort, famed for its medicinal seawater and pine-scented air. It's also home to 73-year-old fitness fanatic Paul Prince, who lives in a local retirement complex.
I'm probably the fittest person here. I am, without a doubt. I've done 31 years karate, Shotokan, which is straight on, okay? But I prefer Shukakai, because Shukakai, you've only got the side of my body to hurt. In this position, I can kick you to start with, or I can punch you. No problem, dead easy.
As a high-flying management consultant, he's travelled all over the world. But to Paul, there's no place like home.
I was actually born in Bournemouth, educated locally, and in July last year, 2015, I moved into this super place. It's a superb place to live, wonderful gardens and generally very pleasant people.
Paul gets on well with most of the other retired residents and counts 82-year-old Brian Lowton amongst his many friends.
I first moved here approximately 7 years ago and just absolutely love the place. It's only 5 miles from the beach. It's a lovely place to live.
Former electrician Brian uses his retirement to focus on his love of gardening.
The gardens are communal, which everybody where they've got a garden as such is involved with. The gardens are wonderful. We get joy out of doing our own little bits within the complex.
But the peaceful haven was about to be interrupted by the arrival of a new resident.
One afternoon I was doing some weeding when I was aware that somebody was behind me. I turned around and it was a new tenant who I'd recognised had moved in recently. He said to me, I see that you're digging up a flower. I said, I didn't think it was a flower, it's a weed. He said, and by the way, I see that you're digging some bulbs up. And I said, so what? So I'm digging some bulbs up. He said, well, you can be fined £1,000 for digging bulbs up and leaving them. And I said, oh, well, in that case, you better report me to the authorities. And with that, he turned and walked off.
The new resident had his own ideas about how the gardens were being managed, which became clear at a community meeting.
He wanted to change everything that was happening within the complex, mostly interfering in regards to the gardens. You shouldn't do that, and you shouldn't do this. Everybody seemed a bit perturbed about that. Somebody wrote a letter, something about, you are not the Titchmarsh of this complex.
The neighbour had his own unique way of making his presence felt in the community, which intimidated some of the other residents.
Wherever he walks, he's whistling. He's known within the complex as the Whistler.
During conversation with fellow tenants, if at any point we hear the whistler coming by his whistling, the conversation stops until the whistle has gone away and we can't hear him anymore. Then the conversation continues.
It wasn't long before the neighbour made his presence felt in a more physical way, after Brian was accused of stealing a spade.
It was a sunny day, the door was open, I was sat down when suddenly the whistler came rushing in with great force. He grabbed my head, putting great pressure on it and pushing me hard right down into the chair. I was saying, call the police, call the police. He proceeded with this outburst of, you're a liar and a thief. With that, he released the pressure on my head and ran out of the door.
Police gave the neighbour a caution.
Everybody in this building is scared stiff of him.
But he shouldn't be on a complex like this where most of the tenants are vulnerable. They're not young. I don't think there's any one on this complex under probably 70.
82-year-old Brian had previously been attacked by his new neighbour, whom the residents had nicknamed the Whistler.
Generally not a very nice character. I tried to avoid him as much as possible.
And it wasn't long before the neighbour struck again. Brian was one of the first on the scene.
I got to this point when I looked and saw the neighbour collapsed on the floor with blood pouring out of his head. Quite a lot of blood. There's quite a lot of blood coming. I phoned the ambulance, plus the police were called. One of the residents here had spoken to the Whistler and said something, and he said, yes, I did it.
The neighbour had struck an 86-year-old resident for watering the hanging baskets with a hose instead of a watering can.
He fell backwards onto the footpath into a street light, banging his head and making him unconscious. Everybody was in a state of shock.
Although severely shaken, the resident made a full recovery in hospital. But straight after the incident, the council obtained an injunction to prevent the neighbour having contact with residents at the complex.
The fact that somebody had done that to one of the tenants here was very upsetting for everybody, and we were all concerned about it, obviously.
The neighbour was later charged and found guilty of assault. He was given a conditional discharge, ordered to pay £400 costs and £100 compensation.
I think he's a dangerous man. He's got a very short fuse, and he's liable to do it again.
Many of the residents were vulnerable, but one person who could look after himself was karate expert Paul Prince.
One afternoon, I came in to do my washing, put my washing inside the machine, shut the door, soap in here, and programmed the machine, like a hot wash.
But on this occasion, Paul realised there was a problem with the washing machine.
To my horror, I had to take my washing out, scalded my hands in taking it out, and move the washing to another machine to reset the program. And I had to go through the whole business again. And in this machine, there was 3 inches of my dirty washing water in the bottom of it.
Paul placed an out-of-order note on the washing machine, just as the neighbour entered the laundrette.
He put his washing on the machine I've just vacated, opened the door of the machine, and was about to put washing in it. And I said, excuse me, I said, I've just put the notice on top of the machine. I didn't want him to put his washing on top of my dirty water in the machine. I was embarrassed. I felt terrible. He said nothing to me at all, looked back at the machine and started punching really hard, all the controls. He then turned around to me and gave me the foulest language I've ever heard in my life. It was absolute pure filth. I saw him begin to clench his fists, and I saw his knuckles going white, and I thought to myself, having done so much karate, I'm in trouble here. Then turned around like this. He then brought his fist back, and then he started to lunge towards me. As the punch was coming towards me, my karate instincts kicked in. I could have blocked him to start with very easily, and I could have hit him very hard and hurt him. I didn't do either. When I opened the door, I was gone, like a rocket. And I heard this bang on the door instead of my jaw. That's what happened.
Paul reported the neighbour to the police, but with no physical evidence, they were unable to act. For some of the residents, the latest incident was the final straw.
I'm inside my bedroom now, which is overlooking the complex, and directly in front of me is the Whistler's front door. Directly on my left-hand side is my front door to the flat, which I don't use anymore. If I'm coming out of my front door and he's also coming out of his front door, then we're facing one another.
Even martial arts expert Paul feels threatened by the presence.
I was talking to a neighbour on this path just here, and he came over, hands on hips, he must have seen me, and stared up at my windows, my flat. I just couldn't believe it was going on. I came in, I locked my door. What else can I do? It's the only security I've got. All of us are the same. And we're scared of him, there's no question of that. the fear that he might just arrive at the door, which he can do, of course. Everybody wants him out of our midst.
The decision was made by myself to, in the end, to get a petition, because this is the third time it's happened here. We were wondering whether there was going to be another assault in the future. And the residents were worried about it, quite rightly as well. We'd like him off the complex. We'd like him to leave.
Brian sent the petition to the council, who responded that any residents who have actually experienced antisocial behaviour should get in touch. In the meantime, the Whistler is still at large. In 2014, 37-year-old graphic designer Saif Alti left his hometown of York and moved to Chester to set up home on this quiet housing estate with his girlfriend.
Living here is quite peaceful. It's like a family community, and there's been no problems in this area since I've been living, apart from the neighbour that I have my issues with.
The neighbour in question lives in the housing association property downstairs. There was no reason to suspect anything amiss until a few weeks after Saif moved in.
Came back from work, sat on the sofa, and then I heard this loud noise outside. It was very, very, very loud. Too loud. So I got up, walked to the window, looked outside from here, and I could see him smoking drugs. And then a couple of more guys came in, and they were all stood outside making loud noises and smoking. I thought, what the hell's going on?
But what started out as a quiet gathering soon became a rowdy party.
And then there was this massive, massive noise going on, like they're thrashing the whole place. They were arguing, they were swearing at each other, and things just got out of hand, out of control. It was just, we couldn't tell what the hell was going on.
When the party dragged on into the early hours, Saif's patience ran out.
I came outside my door, knocked on his door. He came out and I said, can you just please keep the noise down? We're trying to sleep, we've got work tomorrow. And he said, I'm allowed to make noise till 10 p.m. I said, what, 10 p.m? He said, yeah, to 10 p.m. I said, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. He said, well, I think it's 10 p.m. I said, keep the noise down. He said, I can do whatever I want to do. Just got me thinking, what am I dealing with?
Saif was already feeling anxious about his neighbour's behaviour, and he soon became alarmed when he noticed his neighbour acting strangely in his garden.
I was walking through my kitchen, and I looked, and I saw him going through the bins.
Saif was so disturbed by the scene outside that he recorded it on his phone.
He's actually going through them, talking to himself. And I was like, what the hell is he doing? He's actually going through them. 10, 15 of them. Absolutely weird, disgusting, ridiculous. I can't even open my kitchen window because of the smell of the bins. He goes and brings bins. Maybe he can find something, a cigarette, I don't know what he finds, some bits and bats, I don't know, it's just, somebody has to ask him. It's just weird.
Saif reported the disturbance to the housing association.
The things he does, the shouting, the screaming. It was just constantly happening to a point where he got very aggressive, very, very aggressive. It just doesn't make sense. It's like some kind of hallucination or I don't know what it is. And it just goes on and on and on for hours until daylight sometimes.
Saif started to log these disturbing incidents to pass on to the housing association. And it wasn't just late-night ranting that kept him awake.
I was in bed and I got up to this loud, loud banging. Looked down and he had the hammer and I'm thinking, oh my God, what is going on? And it was literally banging all the way along the walls down there. banging so hard. And I thought, what is going on here? And he was shouting, do you want me to be quiet? I'll show you what quiet is. And he just kept doing that all the way round. Massive, and he wasn't stopping. And I was thinking at this point, that is crazy. Really got scared. And at that point, it was just too much for us to take.
I felt wary and on alert because of his nature and the way he's behaving. He's trying to give me the message that this is how I live, you either like it or not.
Matters came to a head in February 2016, when the neighbour's aggressive behaviour spilt over in shocking fashion.
I was sat on the sofa, watching TV, and then suddenly I heard this big, massive bang. It was literally so loud, I thought, oh my God. So I got up, and he was in my garden, topless, just wearing his jeans, and he was growling, and he was aggressive, and he had this like anger on his face. And I said, what can I do for you? He goes, oh, sorry, no, I just fell on your door. And I was looking for my lighter. And I said, are you sure? And he goes, yeah. I was like, okay. So literally, I went back again, came back, just literally before I sit, and it was bang, 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 bang. It was literally the door rattling. I thought in any minute, it's just literally he's gonna go in. He's gonna come in, actually. He's gonna break that door in.
Terrified, Saif called the police and ran downstairs to barricade the front door.
I put my hand on this handle, put my back this way, and tried to support myself as much as I can while the door was literally shaking on me. So every time he kicks it, I'm like, I shake, literally, and it was just bang, 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 bang. This was going on for a good 15 minutes. Just kept kicking and shouting and swearing, open that door, and then it was the bang, massive kick to the door. And at this point, I thought, what will happen if he does manage to open the door? Police out with me, like, what's going on? I was like, now it just went quiet, and I don't know, I can hear him walking around. So I got up, went up the stairs, came to this window, and saw him. By that time, literally all the neighbourhood came out, everyone. And at that point, the police came and they took him away. That is the fear that we live in every day. We just want peace and quiet. It is a nightmare, to be honest.
Following his arrest, Saif's neighbour was cautioned and warned to keep his distance. The neighbour was released the very next day, much to Saif's surprise.
What does a person have to do to be really cautioned or really dealt with? What does he have to do? Does he have to break in?
In the weeks after his release, the neighbour's aggressive behaviour continued, leaving Saif and his girlfriend permanently on edge.
Even if I sleep, I'm always alert. And it's a very edgy. I'm always edgy. I'm always paranoid of every single bang. So no, I'm not having any joy of living here, especially. No peace, and just horrible. Very.
In June 2016, the neighbour finally overstepped the mark when he launched a tirade of vicious abuse.
So I was cutting my garden. He went and opened all the windows in his living room, and he was shouting out loud, "You Turkish bastard, black smackhead." It was just, "I'm gonna kill you, I'm gonna kill you," and it was just on repeat. I thought, that's it, I had enough of you.
The police were called, and the neighbour was arrested once more, but he wasn't getting off the hook this time. He was charged with racially aggravated harassment and was in court a month later.
It was the most delightful news I've ever heard, that he pleaded guilty. It was big smiles. Big smiles, my girlfriend, me, everyone.
But Saif's joy soon turned to disbelief. Despite being given a 2-year restraining order and sentenced to 16 weeks in prison, because of time already served, the neighbour would be coming out in just 2 weeks.
I said, coming out where? She said, coming back to his property. I said, how is that possible? He is a threat to my life and to my girlfriend and to the community. Why do I have to live through this fear again?
One of the conditions of the neighbour moving back was that he couldn't access his property via Safe's front garden. We were filming on the day of his release and witnessed the neighbour breaking the terms of his order and making a racket downstairs.
Guys, excuse me. Guys, is that banging coming from downstairs, isn't it? Yeah?
Safe immediately reported the incident to the police.
He's got a restraining order for 2 years on not to contact, communicate, or cause me fear, violence, and harassment. And now, literally, as soon as he entered his property, the same thing happened again. He was talking to himself, and then he's banging things that I don't know where it's coming from, and he's just like breaking things and shouting and screaming. The same life that we've lived, the same issue that he got sent and been taken away for the intimidation and harassment. He's literally caused it from the first minute that he's just come back.
The police arrived and decided there was enough proof to arrest the neighbour for breaching his restraining order. He was sent back to prison for 16 weeks. But for Safe, that's of little comfort until a long-term solution is found for his nightmare neighbour.
I've lived here for 2 years. I'm exhausted. I am mentally drained. I just want him to move out because I've had literally enough. I can't tolerate his behaviour, not for one more second.
When charity worker Andrea Campbell moved from the hustle and bustle of South London, she was looking forward to a quieter life in Luton.
I moved in this flat 2009 and I was shocked because I didn't have my own place. I was glad. And then I looked around and I thought, oh my God, it's nice.
For Andrea, life was perfect. Until one day when she was disturbed by strange noises from the empty flat beneath hers.
I think he was moving something up the stairs and it was really loud. And I thought, I've never heard anything like that before. This went on all night, this banging. All I could hear was stamping, banging and stamping.
Andrea decided to ignore the noise, but when it continued over the next few days, she decided to investigate.
I went downstairs. I said, why do you keep banging to him? You know, I can hear everything up there. I was angry.
It was Andrea's first meeting with her new neighbour, Makuno Joshfat, and she wasn't impressed with his reaction.
He didn't have no apology, nothing, sorry, no, nothing. He was like, just went back in his flat as though it's nothing, nothing. I just thought that were weird, he didn't care.
Andrea returned to bed, but despite the late-night confrontation, she claims her new neighbour continued banging throughout the next day, causing her to challenge him yet again.
I looked out of the window, saw two men. I shouted at him and I said, why do you keep banging? He laughed. It was funny to them.
Joshfat, who goes by the name Joe, says Andrea was overreacting.
He was shouting at me like, you're making noise, but I was like doing the renovation. I was painting the house, you know what I mean, all this kind of stuff.
But Andrea claims the noises from Joe's flat continued long after he had settled in, and it was more than just redecorating.
I can hear loud music. It can go on for a long time, the music. Like, sometimes they play at 1 o'clock at night. God, it was hell. I felt like running out and not coming back.
I don't really play music. Half the time I'm out of the house like this, you know what I mean? Like, she complained about everything I do, everything I touch in my house, like the door, microwave to put it on, like, you know what I mean? Like.
Andrea says she tried to reason with Joe again and again, but getting nowhere, she turned to the council in desperation.
I've had enough. That was it. I was fed up because I felt like giving it up, this flat. You know, I didn't find her very helpful. All he said was, we'll send them letters. that was it. I can't sleep, and is this all you can do?
When the council reported back, they said that they couldn't find enough evidence that Joe's noise was causing a nuisance. Andrea was at her wit's end.
I wanted to get them evicted, but I didn't have any proof. I felt like I was in a nightmare.
Feeling her complaint had fallen on deaf ears and frustrated with the council, Andrea asked for help elsewhere.
I must have called the community police quite a lot, because he was playing music. I said, I can't stand this. The woman said to me, we can't do now. We don't deal in noise. That's what she said. And I said, I was a bit upset, you know, I just want someone to help.
Having tried to deal with the situation rationally by calling the council and the police, Andrea felt she was getting nowhere, and one day, after a week of sleepless nights, she took drastic action.
I saw him, he was talking to someone, and he looked all smug and he was like laughing.
So I reached down and got the nearest statue and I raised it above my head and I threw it at him. It flew through the air and it landed there on the concrete. I didn't want to hit him, I just wanted to scare him.
But Joe remembers it differently.
It hit my shoulder like, you just like, you know, my shoulder goes down and breaks out into pieces.
It hit you on the shoulder?
Yeah.
He was angry. He was shocked.
It wasn't long before Andrea's actions came back to haunt her.
I was sat here watching a property programme when I heard a knock on the door. I saw 2 police women standing there.
I don't want police here. No, I'm not a criminal. So I had to go away and I felt, oh no, I'm gonna go to prison or something. You know, I was so upset.
Andrea was arrested for common assault, for throwing the ornament at Joe, and issued with a formal warning. But Andrea says the noise disturbance from downstairs continued. At the end of her tether, she decided to fight fire with fire, and bought her own stereo.
Anytime they make a noise, I'm going to turn mine up.
Downstairs, Joe and the other neighbours felt the full force of Andrea's new weapon of choice.
Everyone in the whole building, they know. Because you'll be playing loud, like, 2 a.m., 1 a.m., like you'll be playing loud 3 a.m., 4.
The council were finally moved to take action, but not in the way Andrea had hoped.
I received a letter one day saying that I'm antisocial, I'm noisy, I bang doors. I play music loud till 10 o'clock at night, 12. I felt bad. I thought, man, how could this happen? I'm not like that.
Realising she'd taken things too far, Andrea decided to try to ignore the noise and get on with her life. But one evening, as she drifted off to sleep, she received a rude awakening.
Suddenly I heard this loud bang. I couldn't believe he was doing it again.
The noise kept Andrea awake and caused her to snap once again.
I thought to myself, this means war.
Pushed to the edge, she grabbed the first thing to hand.
I picked up a vase and headed to his flat. As I made my way down to his flat, I felt furious. I threw it and it smashed, and then I ran back to my flat.
And that's when I like opened the door and she ran away like, I called the police.
Around an hour later, I heard a knock on the door. There were 2 of them, 2 policemen.
The police walked me up to his front door and made me sweep up the broken vase.
And they said, if you do that again, we'll arrest you. I said, I'm not going to do that anymore.
After 5 years of problems, both neighbours remain in their flats. Joe is concerned that the noise issue has become an obsession for Andrea.
I was thinking about giving up the flat, like, you know, for my security, my kids and myself as well.
Because of Andrea?
Because of Andrea.
With the situation in deadlock, Andrea, also feels uneasy in her home.
I keep away from this flat. I'm never here. I go to my friends a lot. Sometimes I don't want to come back because I feel scared. I'm still waiting to move. Still waiting to hear from the council. Still waiting.
Living in flats means living on top of one another, which can lead to a close sense of community or feeling under threat from the person upstairs.
He's devious.
Thought I'd got a perfect neighbour.
He's manipulative.
I didn't know what he was capable of.
And he's a bully.
"50-year-old divorcee Christine Passingham has spent the last 18 years building her life in Leicestershire, where she lives with 2-year-old Archie the dog and painter and decorator Colin.
It's been for nearly 3 years now. It's the best 3 years of my life. Love the bloke to bits.
Living in a tight-knit community, Christine takes pride in being a good neighbour.
I'll do anything for my neighbours. Like, I'll put the bins out, I'll sweep the passageway out, I try and keep the garden areas nice.
So when a new neighbour moved into the empty council flat above her, Christine was keen to get acquainted.
He seemed quite nice, sensible, well-mannered, clean, tidy, and could have a bit of a laugh with him.
But for upstairs neighbour Louisa, who lived directly opposite, first impressions were very different.
About 2 o'clock in the morning, I'd heard a taxi pull onto the car park. Didn't make any sense. The door slammed, somebody belching. It was him coming across the car park. But he was behaving like a child. It was almost like, I'm letting you know I'm here.
Christine's reaction was the exact opposite.
He was cheeky, which I liked, and I thought, brilliant, going to have another good neighbour here. And that's what I really did think.
He just sort of managed to fall through the door by the sound of it and effing and blinding and shut the door, and that was it.
The first night at the flat, there was a few noises, like mooching around and a bit of banging, but we just put it down to his new tenant is moving in, let him move in and settle down.
But soon, Christine's patience was to be tested.
The early hours, one morning, me and my partner was in bed and we heard, it sounded like a metal mop bucket being dragged across the bedroom ceiling. It went on for hours, literally hours. We didn't get no sleep at all that night. And it'd start with stomping across the floors, then he'd put his washing machine on, and because he ain't got no carpet, it used to vibrate all the way across the flat. He'd open and bang his kitchen windows and his bedroom windows, slam the front door, run up and down the stairs, and go on till about 7 o'clock in the morning. Every night. Every night I had to do it.
Fed up with their noisy neighbour, Christine and Louisa took action.
I decided to come up the stairs and have a word, because I'd had like 10 sleepless nights. I felt like I had to have a word with them.
As Christine went to confront him, upstairs neighbour Louisa tried to film it through her spy hole, directly opposite the neighbour's front door.
The videoing was for our protection, so it didn't become his word against our word.
Eventually he opened his front door. I says, could I have a word with you about the noise? And he says, basically, I'm not doing anything. I says, you're banging, you're moving stuff around, you're being quite loud. This is like the early hours of the morning. And he says, I'm sorry, but I'm not doing anything. And I says jokingly to him, I says, you're not going to be my nightmare neighbour, are you? He answered me with a smirk on his face and go, no, me darling, of course I'm not. Every time you had a word, the noise got louder. It was just getting louder and louder as it went on. And I couldn't cope with that. I decided I had to make a phone call to the council. And I spoke to a member of the Antisocial behaviour and explained about my new neighbour. And she said she would send me some diary sheets out. I used to write notes of through the night what was happening, and then in the morning I'd get up and I'd fill the actual diary sheets in properly through the day, what was going on. I was told by the council if it ever come to court, then the sheets would be needed for evidence. I didn't think it would get to that.
When the council reviewed the log sheets, they issued her neighbour with a series of warnings. But the situation between the neighbours was about to get worse.
I could hear trickling of water, and I looked out the lounge windows and it wasn't raining, and I looked out the kitchen window and I could see water on it. At first I thought I'd weed out the window, so I got up to have a look, and I came into the kitchen and I could see all dirty water down my window, and I thought, what's that? And I'd got washing out on the line, so I thought I'd go outside and have a look. I came outside, I seen the metal bucket, and I noticed kitchen window open, and I shouted up, "Have you just thrown that out the window? It's gone all over my washing." He replied back laughing, "Well, wash it again." Well, mad because I just washed all my bedding. The mop bucket definitely got bleach in it because my bedding stunk of it. I chucked the bedding away. He knew what he was doing.
What was he doing?
Trying to destroy people's lives. Because he ain't got a life, he didn't want nobody else to have a life. He made my life hell living here. I didn't want to be here. I felt like giving my flat up.
In spite of warnings from council officials, the intimidation continued.
We sat out here, obviously, just having a cup of tea and a chat after Colin returning back from work. And then he started shouting out the window, calling me a slag, a prostitute. Colin was a drug dealer. And then he shouted down, "I'll come down and then I'll do you, and then I'll do your partner."
Oh, and I just said to him, well, come down then.
Felt a bit uncomfortable by the abuse, so we both decided to go back in home.
You just never knew when he was going to do out, did you? Do you know what I mean? He was always on tenterhooks with him, you know.
And I said to Colin, "I've had enough of this, so I'm going to phone the police." The police came out, they went up and had a word, and they come and knocked my flat door, and they says that is his behaviour.
With no solution from the police, Christine decided to take matters into her own hands.
I seen him heading towards a block of flats, so I thought I'd go out and approach him about the noise and his behaviour. And I went up to him and I says to him, "Your noise and the way you're behaving, you're keeping me awake, you're making me ill." He moved a bit closer towards me and he says, "I'm not doing anything, I'm not doing anything." He says, "You're trying to cost me my flat, you're trying to get me kicked out." I says, "That isn't the situation. I don't want that to happen." But I says, "You've got to keep your noise down, you've got to start respecting other people." And he reached his left hand out and he come forward and he went like that straight in my eye. I thought, whoa, it took me by shock because I never ever thought it would physically hurt me. All my left eye, my eyelid was all purple all the way along. It was quite swollen. I've never ever had to put up with a neighbour like him.
Christine's partner Colin was furious and decided it was time for a confrontation.
I've had enough.
Across the hall, neighbour Louisa was alarmed by the commotion.
I'd heard Colin come up into the stairwell. I heard him knocking on the door. So I went to the spiral, but I wouldn't step outside the front door.
He's answered the door eventually. I says, "What are you doing? You know, you've upset Christine."
But no one would expect what happened next with the tattooed tenant.
He'd started crying that he'd had enough. And Colin went to put his arm around him.
I tried to comfort him, and he sobbed, and all of a sudden, then next minute he just kind of went, "Well, I'm all right now," you know, that kind of attitude. And I went, "You know, there's just no helping you." So I decided then, obviously, to walk back off, making my way back down the stairs.
But just as quickly, the neighbour's demeanour changed again.
And I heard, "I can spit down here faster than a spider can drop," before Colin could get down, and he spat a couple of times down.
So I just waited for him to finish what he was doing, and then just said to him, it's a waste of time, there's just no helping you. You know, I've done my best to try and help you. And then that was me. I walked out the door.
And Colin come down, and I says, did you get through to him? He says, Christine, he's bladdered, absolutely drunk. Can't understand a word he's saying.
When the neighbour realised that Louisa had witnessed the entire event through the spy hole, he turned his attention to her front door.
Stood there, waving his arms about, looking directly at the spy hole, saying, I'll cut your head off, I'll chop your arms off. So, which panicked me then, so I did the best I could to take a video.
Louisa was trying to goad him into giving her the evidence she needed.
Come on, you son of a bitch. A lot of it was mumbling, I'll have you, you bastards, and I'll cut you. Doing this kind of thing when he was saying, I'll cut you, and I was just terrified.
The neighbour was making life a living hell for residents, and things were about to get violent for Christine Passingham's four-legged friend, Archie.
I heard the security door open from the main block, and a few seconds after I heard my dog, like, make a squealing noise. I jumped up off the sofa and came out. Then I noticed him stood at the end of the pathway near the car park wall, smiling with his fist clenched. And I knew he'd touched my dog. I bent down and picked my dog up. To see what was wrong, I felt the dog all over and he wasn't yelping until I touched his hair. And I looked at his hair and it was like all purple inside. I think anyone who attacks an animal is cruel. I really do. Not just my dog, anybody. There's no reason for it.
But with no witnesses, Christine had no proof. She decided to move on and focus on her dad's forthcoming 80th birthday, which she'd saved hard to pay for.
It was early on a Sunday morning, about 8 o'clock in the morning. I'd been to the local bank to withdraw some money. I'd got my money out the cash point, I'd put it in my purse, put my purse in my bag, zipped it up. And I noticed he was standing behind me. I'm coming to walk along the brook to head home, and I noticed he was getting closer to me. And I put my hand over my bag like that. As I walked along down, he's hauled hold of my bag at the back like that and says, Christine, give me some money. So I turned around, I says, just off and leave me alone. I ran home because I thought I need to get home. I felt very threatened by this. I thought I could smell alcohol. And I thought, he's already given me a black eye. Is he going to pull me to the ground now and rob my bag? I can't afford to lose this money. I was very upset. I was crying by the time I got home. It just made me laugh. I felt like crap. I did. And I didn't feel happy in my home. And this is how we're all the time, living here.
Later that morning, Christine made a statement to the police, and her neighbour was arrested. With Christine's diaries and Louisa's video footage, the local council now had a strong case to apply for an injunction against the neighbour. Legally, he would have to keep his distance or face time behind bars.
The council came round and told us that we were going to court and gave us the court date, and also says there'd be a taxi to pick me and Louisa up at 9 o'clock in the morning.
But although Christine and Louisa made it to court, their neighbour didn't. In his absence, the injunction was granted.
We got home that day and we found out that he had been arrested for the theft of a person's handbag in the local village.
Their neighbour served 9 weeks for the handbag theft. He then broke his injunction on the day of his release by intimidating Christine in a shocking and very personal way.
I was in the bedroom putting some stuff away in the cupboards, and as I turned back and looked, I noticed he was stood on the edge of the path with his tracky bottoms down and his boxers down, holding his penis, smiling and laughing at that. And I thought to myself, what is this man doing? I absolutely despise him. I think he's vile.
Her neighbour was rearrested and served another 4 weeks. When he was in prison, the council evicted him from his flat. He's since been released, but his current location is unknown.
I'm happy that they've had him evicted, but I also believe that we should know his whereabouts. So then, if we're in them areas, we can be a bit more careful.
But for Christine and Louisa, it's a waiting game to see if their neighbour might come back.
Even now, when I go out to the shops and things, if I see anybody with a shaved head, it just takes me back and I start panicking.
I do worry if I'm in Leicester. I think if I bumped into him, I would panic.
In every busy British town, pressure on parking spaces can cause friction between neighbours.
I wouldn't have believed that anybody would be that stupid just over the dispute for a parking space.
In 2011, lab technician Roger Tillotson found a new home in the coastal city of Plymouth.
I was looking for somewhere to live, and there was an immediate sort of nice and homely atmosphere to this house. So I thought, yes, good area. It's central to town. I don't know many people here, but the people that I do know are very friendly.
But soon after moving in, Roger heard that one of his neighbours might not be quite so friendly.
I was having a chat with a neighbour, and he's saying, watch out from across the road. My first reaction to that was, well, if he leaves me alone, I'll leave him alone. You don't have to mix with him. I live the other side of the road, not a problem.
The only drawback to Roger's new home was the limited parking space in the street.
If you find a space, you park. If you have to park up the road, you have to park up the road. So it's still luck of the draw.
But Roger soon noticed that not everyone played by the rules.
Often, he would put his wheelie bins over there in the road outside of his house to reserve a parking space. This is a very busy street, and of course parking is of a premium. We'd all like to be able to park outside of our houses, but it's not always possible. So what I did was I would move the wheelie bins from the road onto the pavement outside of his house and then simply park.
He's a big chap, 6 foot plus, well-built, very stocky. Has his beard in a little plait under his chin. Looks like a biker chap. The sort of person that you would get out of his way if your paths crossed. People were scared of him.
The neighbour hasn't responded to the allegations made in this programme, but he has got support from some of his neighbours.
Personally, I had never had an issue. He was always affable. He seemed to have quite a wide circle of friends. He had his own little car he used to park, but not in a way which was with any lack of consideration for any of the other users of the area. We all have, on occasion, put wheelie bins out. Most of the neighbours here have a sort of an unspoken, unwritten agreement where you put bins out just to keep a space clear, but I can't recollect of doing that on a regular basis.
But Roger Tillotson says he regularly had to move wheelie bins in order to park his car. And in February 2015, when a friend came to visit, he did the same for her car.
I moved the wheelie bins from here. Cannot reserve parking spaces. It's not right, it is not fair to the other residents living in the street. Parking space. So we simply parked the car there.
But when they came back to the car a little while later, Roger says he and his friend found they'd received a response from his neighbour.
Somebody had left a note under the windscreen wiper. Took the note, had a look, read its content, worded to the effect that, what do you think the wheelie bins were placed for here, you
This was the first communication that we'd had. To use language like that with somebody that he doesn't know, very offensive and unnecessary. And, that gives you a rough idea as to who you're dealing with.
In the weeks that followed, Roger says his neighbour started to employ a new tactic.
And there were several occasions when we got back to the car where we put one wheelie bin right at the front of the car and one wheelie bin right at the back of the car. Of course, we'd had to move both to get the car out of the space. But that, again, it wouldn't have stopped me from moving the wheelie bins to park. Public road.
After weeks of having his car blocked in by his neighbour's bins, Roger Tillotson says he snapped. So he moved them to block the neighbour's car instead, with dire consequences.
First time we were aware of his presence was when he'd come running down through from his house, got to the side of the car, bang, bang.
It happened very, very quickly. All we could see was this huge, huge man then standing by the side of the car.
He had his head like this, holding the door closed so I couldn't get out. His face was pressed against the window. And he was shouting and swearing, and he was pinning the door closed. You know, it simply wouldn't let me out, and he just kept on and on and on and on. Very scary. My friend was very upset, you know, very fearful for her life, basically.
And with that, got on the phone to the police.
Roger says that his neighbour finally let go of the car door and turned to go back to his house.
I eventually managed to get out. I said to him, "Where the hell do you think you're going? The police are on their way." He then physically pushed me out of the way. I moved forward to him and pushed him out of the way. With that, my friend got between us to try and stop any further altercation.
Roger says his neighbour then ran back into his house, only to return a few seconds later.
He then came running down his path, down his steps, got to his car, moved the bins out of the way, and then sped off down the road here towards the roundabout.
But the danger hadn't passed.
I heard a screeching of tyres down the road, and then noticed that he's turned round and was driving back up the road towards the mini roundabout at the end here. So I stepped out into the road as I saw him coming towards me. And I put my hands up like this to say, "Stop, stop." He was looking at me, he was scarlet red.
The evil look on his face was something I won't forget. I can see it now, him looking at me through the windscreen. "I'm gonna get you."
Realised that when it was too late to try and get out of his way, the front of his car struck me and hurled me through the air across the tarmac into a heap on the ground. He knew he'd run me over. He didn't even stop. He just left me for dead in the road and just carried on regardless.
Passers-by rushed to the aid of Roger Tillotson as he lay in the road. He was taken to hospital with spinal bruising and muscle damage.
Another couple of inches and I, yes, almost certainly would have been dead. What would make someone do that? Why, why would you run somebody over with the, high probability of killing this person just over a parking space? I mean, that's crazy. The guy's unhinged.
The neighbour was arrested, and in court he pleaded guilty to driving without due care and damaging property. He was banned from driving and received a 4-month suspended sentence.
I was so angry at the time on the day of the court, and I said to the police officer, well, that's fine, because if there's somebody I don't particularly like, I can get into the car and then run them over and be fine, because I'll get away with it.
But a month after the sentencing, the neighbour was back before the courts. He'd broken his driving ban.
The moron decided one day he was going to drive. And then openly said to his probation officer that he'd driven because he doesn't like public transport.
Police were called to the probation offices to arrest the neighbour, but he tried to escape. And police had to use force to stop him driving away. This time, the neighbour was headed for jail.
He'd gone to prison for 8 months. I was elated. Absolutely ecstatic. It was brilliant. He got what he deserved. Shame it wasn't a bit longer.
With the neighbour out the way, Roger Tillotson can park wherever he likes. For now.
At no point do I regret doing what I did. It may be foolhardy, but no, he's not going to bully me.
The village of Shurland in Derbyshire, nestled in the countryside a few miles from the Peak District. It's where paint sprayer Stephen House and his young family moved in 2014 after he got a new job.
When we first moved into the area, it was really quiet, set back from the road, which was great.
Stephen's wife, Hannah, who doesn't want to be identified, thought the village a great place to bring up their 4-year-old son.
The views appealed to us. There weren't any houses opposite or anything, so it was just a row of houses and that were it. The countryside were just round the corner, which were lovely.
And their neighbours initially welcomed them into the community.
Our next door neighbours helped us do the garden. They gave us a patio set, you know, like a garden chairs and things. And we even got welcome cards. So it's pretty nice. We thought we'd got a nice place.
Initially, they got on well with a neighbour 2 doors down.
She signed a parcel for us. I went round to collect it. She was very nice, very polite, and seemed very friendly.
But there was one thing all the neighbours were very particular about.
They've got their own rules. They say where you can park and where you can't park. It was only the neighbours that told us you can park in bay number 9.
But when visitors came to his house, Stephen was forced to park on the shared driveway next to the bays, which ran to a few houses behind Stephen's. But the second time Stephen did this, he heard a knock at the door from a neighbour he'd never met.
When I answered it, he basically just said, "Will you move your car? No, please." And then walked away. I thought he was quite rude and abrupt.
Stephen, being the person he is, just went and just did it. Just moved it out of his way.
But Stephen's card was marked. The next time Stephen had guests round and he parked on the shared driveway again, he got another visit from the same neighbour.
He obviously came home, came down the side of the house and shouted, "Can you move your car? I've told you about this before." I was eating my tea, I had a mouthful of food, and I just didn't move it. I thought, well, I'll move it in 10 minutes. About 5 minutes later, he came back and he says, "What's your problem? I've asked you to move your car, I've told you not to park there." And then I think he called Hannah fat bitch or something like that, and then walked off. As I went to go move the car, he walked up with his wife, telling us that we weren't allowed to park there and that we weren't allowed other people to park in our bay.
Hannah was about to have her own confrontation about parking. After breaking her ankle, Hannah needed to get closer to the house and was dropped off on the shared drive.
I just got back from a hospital appointment that Mum had taken me to. She was just helping me in the house.
But the neighbour from 2 doors down wasn't happy when she returned home in her car.
She drove up the driveway, she'd managed to get past, parked at the top of the driveway where she normally parks. She actually got out of the car, walked back, telling my mother-in-law that she wasn't allowed to park there.
I lost my temper a bit. I raised my voice. I was shouting, "Look, you've got a problem over nothing, really. You still got past, and can you not be a bit sympathetic?" She got rather upset, saying it was a private drive and it's not ours to use and we're always in her way and things like that.
By now, the House family's parking had annoyed several of their neighbours. But after returning late one evening in July 2015, Stephen chanced a quick stop on the shared driveway.
I got my son out first, took him into the house, put him in bed, and I came back for Hannah. The whole process probably took 10 minutes.
Stephen went back outside to move his car, but someone had spotted where Stephen had parked and was inspecting the car on the shared driveway.
So as he was walking around the car, he was muttering to himself, and I heard him say something along the lines of all the places he could park, he has to park here.
The man walked off, and Stephen moved the car down the drive to his bay. But the man followed him.
So the man approached from the back of the car. He then slumped on the car like so, slurring his words, and I could smell alcohol on him.
It was the ex-partner of the neighbour who Hannah had argued with previously about parking on the drive.
And he said, "You're not allowed to park there, it's a private drive, and I don't appreciate your missus swearing at my missus."
Hannah's ears were burning, so she stood up for Stephen.
I shouted down to him, if you've got a problem, you need to come and speak to me. And he replied with, get back in the house, you've got to be.
I said, we'll leave it till the morning. But he wanted to resolve it now, which, you know, at this point, I just said to him, get off my car. At that point, he pushed himself off the car, and he said, I can lean on your car if I want to. And he swung his arm back, and with a wild sort of haymaker, he hit me in the face. I immediately hit him back with my right arm. His glasses went flying over the car at the side of us. But he was then able to grab the back of my neck and pull me really close to him so that we were basically touching face to face. He then scraped his teeth down the side of me. I think he was trying to bite my ear. I could smell the alcohol and his spit all over my face, but he sort of clamped on here and then bit me. I felt his teeth sink into the side of my face. The only thing I could do was push him, but as I did so, he sort of took us both down with him.
Stephen scrambled up to escape, but the neighbour had hold of Stephen's arm.
He was trying to bite me, so I was holding his face away with one hand, trying to pull the other one away from his mouth, and he was snarling like a dog or a zombie or something. You know, from there, the only thing I could do was hit him in the face again, to which he immediately let go.
The whole time, pretty much, I was just screaming, Stephen, get back here.
Stephen ran back to their house and Hannah called the police.
As soon as I came into the house, Hannah said to me, look in the mirror, you need to have a look. And, you know, from her reaction, I thought that my ear was falling off or, you know, ripped half my face away or something like that. So I immediately rushed over, and that's when I saw the damage they'd caused.
The neighbour's attack had left cuts all over Stephen's face. But the neighbour still wasn't finished.
He was continuing to come back and shout things at us, and I didn't feel like it was quite over.
Stephen went back outside to find out what the neighbour still wanted.
Suddenly he stopped and he said, look, mate, can I have a friendly chat? And I just replied to him, if you wanted a friendly chat, then why attack me? To which he then replied, I'll kick the out of you and I'll kill your wife.
This was the final straw for Stephen. He called the police again, and they arrived minutes later.
They went round and arrested him. As far as I know, the police found him staggering around in his garden looking for his keys.
In March 2016, the neighbour was found guilty of assault by beating and using threatening words. He was sentenced to 16 weeks, suspended for 12 months, ordered to pay over £1,200 and given a 2-year restraining order.
The sentencing, I felt, was quite lenient, but to be honest, I was just glad it was over.
The neighbour declined to comment for this programme, but other neighbours claimed Stephen parked wherever he wanted, and Hannah House would be abusive when approached about the car. Hannah denies this. Stephen and his family moved away from Shurland a month later, to a house with excellent parking facilities.
It sounds ridiculous to, you know, to think that this all came from an issue with parking. If you don't get on with your neighbours, just don't speak to them.
10 years ago, life was sweet for financial services worker Christian Burke. He'd landed himself a dream job in London and moved down from Yorkshire to experience life in the fast lane.
It was a fantastic time to be living there and to socialise with people. It's a very hard and fast pace, but I enjoyed it, absolutely.
Then almost overnight in 2010, while staying with his parents back in Yorkshire, Christian's world came crashing down.
I just woke up one day and I couldn't see my mother and father's faces. And I went to my local hospital. It took about 4 months to finally work out what was wrong with me. And they said there's nothing they could do.
Christian was diagnosed with a rare eye condition, which saw his vision slowly deteriorate.
The best way to describe how I see is like if you've got net curtains in your lounge or your bedroom and you're looking through a net curtain which is quite a good quality, and it's just a fog. It's just, I can't see any detail.
As the condition deteriorated, Christian became unable to work. Having moved back home with his parents, he sank into a deep depression as he struggled to come to terms with his eyesight getting worse by the day.
I was crying quite a lot. I just thought I was going to lose all my sight. My mum and dad were absolutely fantastic. I was living with them because they helped me emotionally as well as physically.
But in 2011, Christian took the decision to move into his own flat, just down the road from his parents, in Shipley, West Yorkshire.
I was a bit apprehensive at first, but I was also very delighted that I've got my own place and obviously my own independence. When I first moved in, the neighbours were very supportive, very friendly, saying good morning, how are you, how are things? And I was, you know, very polite to them and respectful to them, making sure I wasn't noisy at all, and they did the same thing, and we all got on very well.
Living in the flat upstairs was 57-year-old Chris Swaby. Things got off to a friendly start between the neighbours.
I actually made Christopher a meal. I think it was spag bowl, and he brought the plate back and he said thank you very much, and we got on.
Like Christian, Chris Swaby also had health issues that prevented him from working.
Can change your mood if you've got serious issues, and I felt sorry for him, I really did, and I did actually say to him, if there's anything I can do for you, I'll help you out. And he turned around and said that I'll do it myself, thanks.
Christian and his neighbour remained on good terms, but then in 2013, when Christian was out with his guide dog Zeus, things took a dramatic and unexpected turn for the worse.
I was out in the garden with Zeus, and I was in the communal gardens around here, and he was just running about like a normal black Labrador would do. He's my gorgeous black Labrador guide dog, and Chris Weber came out of nowhere, near where that tree was, and said, "Keep your dog under control or I'll kill you." And I've got Zeus and we put him back into the flat, and I just thought, what's that about? I felt intimidated, bullied, frightened because of what he said. He was swearing, and I was scared for Zeus as well because he was my best mate.
As well as being scared by Chris's violent outburst, Christian was also puzzled by what had caused him to snap.
I was bemused. I was like, where's that come from? You know, it's like, you know, one day it's night and day. You know, how you turn from being okay to being really nasty, and I don't know. Absolutely, got no idea.
Christian was prepared to put Chris's behaviour down as a one-off, but shortly afterwards, another encounter in the communal garden left him in no doubt that their friendship was over for good.
I was walking in the garden in the morning. It was a lovely day, and I said good morning to my neighbours, which were sitting over here, and Chris Weber was there, and he said, "Don't speak to me, you stupid." And so then I walked away feeling very apprehensive and frightened because that was not something I was expecting. I just walked back inside and just thought, why is he bullying me?
Christian didn't understand why Chris's attitude towards him had changed, but soon suspected that his chat about his previous life in London had started to grate on his neighbours.
Another neighbour came to see me in my home and said he's been calling you the C word, the blind C word, and the blind bastard, and he thinks he's better than everyone else around here, which I'm not. Just because I've got 3 LLs and a degree, and I worked in finance for 15 years, doesn't mean I'm better than anyone else living where I'm living now.
Angry and frustrated at Chris's treatment of him, Christian decided it was time to go and have a word. He wasn't prepared for Chris's vicious response.
So he opens the door and he tells me to off and then tries to smash the door into my face. I jar the door with my foot, and then I say, "Why are you being so nasty to me and telling neighbours that I'm a blind bastard?" And I said, "Don't be bullying someone who's blind like me, because I won't stand for it." And then I released my foot from the door and I went back inside.
But just a few minutes later, Christian had some unexpected visitors.
It was the police. And the police came in, I invited them in, and I was quite surprised. And they said that they were called because there was an incident where I was behaving as if I was threatening a neighbour of mine, Christopher Swaby, but it wasn't, it was a complete lie.
Christian was taken to the police station and, much to his surprise, was given a caution for a public order offence. The incident had taken its toll on Christian's mental health, and he had to give up his guide dog Zeus, as he was unable to care for him properly. But events were to take a more sinister and violent turn.
2 days after I spoke to Chris Webb regarding his insults towards me, I got notice that his son was coming round to have a word with me. I heard a massive crash on the door, and I got up straight away, and lots of swearing, saying, "You're a blind bastard, I'm gonna get you." And so I realised it was Luke Swaby who had said that, because I could tell by his voice. I rang 999 and I said, "Can you please come round because my door is getting kicked in."
Police arrived and spoke to all parties. As it was the second time they'd spoken to Christian and Chris Swaby, both were given warnings. Chris's son, 29-year-old Luke Swaby, lives in a nearby village. Until that day, Christian had barely had any contact with him.
He's quite a intimidating guy. His voice was quite deep, and you wouldn't want to mess with him. And I never really spoke to him. I just said hello to him once.
But Christian was soon to get to know Luke a whole lot better. For a few months, things quietened down between the neighbours. But then in August 2016, out of the blue, all hell broke loose after Christian received an unexpected knock at his door.
So I got up from my chair and I opened the door. And Luke's there in front of me, so I step out and I go, "What are you doing?" And he gets me in a headlock and he goes, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And he smashes my head against the floor and smacks me several times. Luke then scampers outside into the garden, and a kind neighbour picks me up from the floor and guides me back into my flat. So I came in from the hallway. My head had grazing, and it wasn't bleeding as such, but it was a big lump and I was feeling very dizzy, hence why I had to call the ambulance. And they came and they looked at my injuries and they asked if I wanted to go to hospital, and I said no. They told me that Luke Swaby was in the garden, so they rang the police because they were concerned about me.
The police arrived on the scene within minutes. Christian believed the incident was over and explained that he didn't want to make a fuss about his neighbours.
I didn't want them to be charged by the police. I just wanted them to have a warning and a chat to regarding the assault I had. But Luke smashed on my door while I was talking about what happened, and the police and I, we looked at each other as if which one's going to get up first to the door. And they got up, and because it was a loud bang, and I was very apprehensive after my ordeal anyway.
And Christian's ordeal wasn't over yet.
They confronted him, and then they marched him outside of the flat, and that is when I thought it would be a good idea to call for backup for police. So I rang 999 again, saying I think you might need some more police officers because Luke Swaby is getting out of control.
Frightened and having called for backup, Christian hoped the situation would soon be under control. But he wasn't counting on Luke's dad, Chris, wanting a bit of the action.
At that time, I was on the phone to the police. Christopher Swaby smashed my door open, and I dropped the phone in mid-call to the police, and I went to the hallway. So I got up, and I rushed to the hallway, and I got his arms, and I pulled him away from my door, forced Christopher Swaby out onto the hallway, and I pushed him next to the window, and obviously Luke's outside with the police in the garden, and he sees us jostling. And then obviously we're still pushing each other, and I've just realised that he's going to come up the stairs.
And then obviously the police follow him up, but before the police get to him, he smashes me quite a few times and I fall onto the floor.
Christian was now under attack from both father and son, and the police had their hands full.
Didn't really hear what was happening. I just saw lots of shouting.
I'm protecting myself with my arm, but it hits me in the ribs and in the head as well. And he kicks me repeatedly on the floor. And then the police come up and pepper spray both Chris and Luke, and I crawled into my flat.
Police vans came and both got arrested and charged with common assault.
Battered and bruised, Christian was told by the police that the whole terrifying assault had been caught on their body cameras. Chris and Luke Swaby were bailed on condition that they weren't allowed to go anywhere near Christian for 3 weeks.
I felt reassured that the police had done their job and they're both being charged with what they did. And they weren't able to come near me at all until the court case had expired.
In September 2016, Luke Swaby pleaded guilty to common assault and was sentenced to 4 months in prison. The court heard that Luke was fueled with drink when he launched his attack.
He also said in the court that it was self-defense. How can you attack a blind man on the floor if it's self-defense? Which baffled me.
Chris Swaby was given a conditional caution, who told us,
"It's all blown out of proportion on Mr. Burt's behalf. Mr. Burt thinks he's above everybody else. He's making it out that I'm a bad neighbour, my family's bad. I know my son shouldn't have done that, but he was only protecting his father."
After the court case, Chris Swaby moved straight back into his flat, leaving Christian feeling vulnerable and scared. He's recently taken the decision to move out of his flat and away from Shipley.
You can live anywhere in the world and you can live next to someone who's very impolite and a disgrace, calling you all the words under the world. So what can you do? You just have to move on, and I'm moving on to a better place, hopefully.